everyone. Welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm Jessie from the Gardener's Workshop. In today's episode, we're sharing a recent interview that Layne and Lisa did with Scott Shepard on the Flower Podcast. They covered lots of great tips and common questions about cool flowers, perennials, biennials, and so much more. So listen in, and I hope you enjoy.
Well, I would say for people to just try to learn the reasons why they're doing something instead of just blindly following someone else's advice. And that's going to allow you to troubleshoot and adjust and adapt whatever you're doing to your specific growing conditions or your equipment. And my husband and I, we were just watching a Renaissance show. We love history type shows, by the way. And it was describing how all the Renaissance masters, they all start off by learning and copying the works of other great artists. And then they go on, they take what they've learned, and then they use that to develop their own unique style. So I would say to do the same thing with gardening or farming and just learn from people that you trust, but then don't be afraid to experiment for yourself and find a way that works better for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott Shepard, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Flower Podcast. Each week we pull up a chair together to talk about the people, ideas, and stories that inspire our floral community. Whether you're a grower, designer, or just someone who loves flowers, I'm glad you're here. And I can't wait to share this week's episode since it's full of friends, fun, and definitely flowers. This week, I'm joined by two familiar voices from the Gardener's Workshop, Lisa Mason-Ziegler, educator, grower, and award-winning author, and I'm excited to chat for the first time with Layne Angelo, co-host of the Seed Talk podcast and seed director at the Gardener's Workshop. We're talking about the incredible resource that Seed Talk has become for growers and celebrating Lisa's recent Silver Laurel Media Award for her latest book, The Cut Flower Handbook. We also dive into the importance of planning ahead for a successful season, from cool flowers that need a little extra time to customizing your own planting plan with Lisa's brand new jumbo calendar journal that's being released later this year, to Layne's tips for germination success. This conversation is packed with advice you can put to work in your farm or garden ASAP, and it's all happening right now on the Flower Podcast. Well, everybody, you're in for a huge treat today. I'm in awe. I am joined by two other podcast hosts, which is always kind of fun to say. Lisa Mason-Ziegler and Layne Angelo. Of course, we all know them from the Gardener's Workshop, but they also have their podcast, Seed Talk. They're located in Newport News, Virginia. And, if you're into gardening, if you're into growing cut flowers, if you are just into getting a little greener in your life, Lisa has created the whole universe that allows, if you need it or you want it, she's probably got it. So that's the thing we always love about it. So welcome, Layne and Lisa, to the Flower Podcast.
Hi, Scott.
Thank you, Scott, so much for having us here today. It is our pleasure.
Yeah, we love the Flower Podcast, so we're excited to be on here with you.
Well, thank you. Well, I know everything you guys do, especially in the world of podcasts and all the other content that you create, is so incredibly helpful. And I know there's been a lot of things going on, and I know Lisa's been on our podcast a couple times, but it's never too soon to get caught up on what's new and exciting, especially with the Gardener's Workshop. But Lisa, a little bird told me, actually a lot of birds, told me that you won an award for your latest book.
I did, Scott. So the Cut Flower Handbook was awarded in 2025 the Silver Laurel Media Award by GardenCom, which, GardenCom is the old Garden Writers Association. So it's just always really sweet and affirming when your peers confirm something you've done. So yeah, my publisher was pretty pleased about it. And
I guess
so we're
so.
really happy and proud and grateful and thankful to GardenCom for that.
Yeah, what a huge honor. I mean, when you look at the list of people who have won that in the past, I mean, it's all the greats that you see that have won that award. So I think that's super awesome. And Layne, you are like all things seed at the Gardener's Workshop. You're the seed manager, and I
Correct.
think when you guys started this podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such. And I just got to tell y'all. So the Seed Talk is a great podcast. I will tell you
Thank you.
that for me personally, it is just a library. If you're trying to find, if you want to learn about growing a specific crop, they probably have an episode to go back. So Layne, how did you get into the world of flowers, and specifically with Lisa?
Well, oh yeah, okay, I'll get to that. So I am a lifelong gardener, Scott, and I've always loved plants and animals, and I've been growing flowers and starting seeds for many years. I actually got my very first grow lights over 18 years ago. I was just checking the other day. So I've grown thousands and thousands of annuals and perennials from seed since then. And I also really love math and science. I have a degree in bioengineering,
Wow.
and my husband and I worked for many years in construction forensics. And we lived our entire lives, born and raised in California up until the pandemic. And we had the opportunity to start working entirely remotely. So we took the opportunity, like many people did, to relocate. And we relocated here to Williamsburg, Virginia. So we garden here on about an acre of land. And we have a nature preserve on one side of us, and we have a marsh and the James River behind us.
Wow.
So we're kind of surrounded by extremely tall trees and lots of interesting creatures, as Lisa can attest, that I've told her about. And in terms of how Lisa and I came to work with each other, when we relocated from California to Virginia, one of my top concerns was that I was losing several months of frost-free growing season.
Oh yeah.
So I was, yeah. So I was concerned about like trying to extend the flower season as long as possible. So I started researching all like which cool season hardy annuals could be planted in the fall to overwinter and then go on to bloom very early in the spring. And I came across an article by Lisa, and she was talking about cool flowers, which I didn't know that that was referring to cool season hardy annuals at the time, but it was referring to that. And of course, her book. So once I found that, I realized I didn't need to continue my own research because she had already done that. And then I was shocked to discover that her farm was actually only about 40 minutes from our house here in Williamsburg. And so I started following her, and I was randomly listening to a replay of a Facebook Live event that she had done. And she mentioned they were looking for at-home seed packagers, and it was a part-time position. It was fully remote, so it was very easy for me to fit into my existing schedule.
Sure.
So I applied, I got the job, and then as everything continued to grow and expand and explode really during the pandemic, I was offered the position of seed manager shortly after that. And so the operation has just continued to grow. I am still managing the seeds here at the Gardener's Workshop. And I also am the co-host with Lisa of the Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne podcast and the co-creator of the Cool Flowers from Seed to Harvest course.
Wow, so much. I mean, who
Yeah.
knew? Like, you moved to Virginia and you think you don't know anybody probably, or maybe you did, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you realize the trying to think of a really dramatic adjective. The mother of all cool flowers is just in your
Yes.
backyard. I mean, isn't that wild?
Yes. Yeah. And it was the exact thing. Like I said, I'm a big spreadsheet person. So I was like collecting data. Anytime I saw someone mention that this overwintered, and I'm like doing all these spreadsheets, and it's like, oh, she already wrote a book on this. And she lives 40 minutes from my house.
That is
So.
so cool. And I know, Lisa, you must have been super excited to have someone like Layne, detail oriented and avid gardener, just join the team.
She very innocently and just kind of applied for the seed packer job. And I thought, yeah, we hired like, I think like 3 or 4 people at that time. And she just shined from the beginning, super highly organized. I mean, she is an engineer through and through, and it is a gift to us. And she just kind of revolutionized the system of seed packing, which is a very complicated, involved deal. I mean, because we package all those seeds in house and they have to be bought and kept fresh, and it's quite a system. And so she is kind of in her element doing that, and we appreciate her so much. And yeah, her being an avid gardener and me being a flower farmer, it's like we just meet in the middle. That's why we start in the Seed Talk podcast. When she first suggested, I've got this long list of questions from customers. Why don't we do a podcast? And we just thought it would be a few series, right? Didn't we, Layne? We never dreamed that it would go
Yeah.
on. Um, but people really, really loved it. And we just really, really love doing it. And it is seed starting, I think, is the most challenging thing for most people. Most people think they just simply can't do it. It's like they try it once or twice and just don't really have the real details to do it. And they think, oh, well, I just can't start seeds. I'll just plants. And so we're inundated with requests for information all the time. And so we spill all the beans all the time on Seed Talk.
I was just going to say, like you mentioned before about it being like a library or resource, that was kind of my vision for it because I was fielding part of my job as seed manager was fielding all these questions from our customers and troubleshooting and working through issues with them. And when I would respond to them via email, like we just talked about, I'm very thorough. So I was writing like an essay back to each person. It was very personalized. And when you start to see all these different questions coming in from people, you're looking at a pretty large data set, and the patterns just really start to jump out at you. And you can really see what everyone's asking. And it's like everyone was asking the same sorts of questions. And when you send an email back, I feel like it's like an official correspondence and it's kind of black and white, but there's a lot of stuff that's a gray area where you
Yes.
might say to someone if you were just having a casual conversation with them, where you might not put that, in your official correspondence. And so, like Lisa said, I said, let's just do a podcast. It was cool flower season at the time. And then that way we can have a conversation, we can answer these questions, and we can direct people there instead of me having to do sort of a personalized response. And now we have built such a great resource that our customer service team is using it constantly, and they can just send people, and we have so many episodes covering so many topics. And just even last week when I was at the fulfillment center, someone came up to me and they said, oh, we had a customer ask about rudbeckia that was wilting. And I said, what type was it? Do you know if it was triloba? And they said yes. And I said, oh, we have an episode for that. So it works perfectly.
And I think people prefer to listen or watch
Yes.
instead of reading. They just get the message more clearly. So it's really become to be a really valuable part of our resource center.
Yeah, I can imagine. Plus, I mean, you just said watch, which I'm glad you said that because obviously we work in the podcast realm where it's all audio. We of course have our own YouTube channel where we've shared these kinds of interviews, but you can watch these things too, and there's notes and things like that. We're getting showing details, and I know. I don't know. It is a really great resource. So if you are a YouTube person, it's there too. And I assume it's just the same name, right? Or is it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Right. Yes, it's the same thing. It's the same audio. It's just accompanied by images that are related. And we'll usually put, if it's a question, the question will be up on the screen, easy to read. Or if we do a lot of checklists or like number one, number two, number three, four, five, those will all be up clearly on the screen as we're talking about them. And it also makes it easy if you're trying to scroll through to find a specific part. It visually lets you do that without having to listen to the whole thing.
Oh wow, that's a good thing too. Well, gosh, there's so many things to talk about. I know that this has been a big push because of the time of year, cool flowers. Everyone's prepping and seeding, and some are already starting things probably, which blows my mind. Because I know it depends on where you are and when you need to start your seed. I assume this is a very busy time for you at the Gardener's Workshop as far as all the shipping and stuff.
with cool flowers, there are three very awkward planting times. That's fall for some of us, winter for some people, and then very early spring for everybody. And in fact, it's like a godsend to the gardening world because this is the time of year garden centers are not busy. A garden store would typically not be busy. But because of cool flowers, our July and August and September and even October are a little crazy, even before we get into the Christmas and then the biggest season of the year, is January, February, and March. So yes, we are, because we have to reach out to people and stimulate them to realize, okay, I better get my supplies, I better get my seeds in time to have them on time. We kind of like, how do you think they have bathing suits in the stores in January when you're going on a cruise? They were making those bathing suits 6 months before. We have to think that far in advance. And yeah, and then to train people to realize if you don't want to miss out on a seed or run out of a supply or something, now is the time to strike. But for us, for where we live, mid-November is our first fall frost. So typically the end of September and October is when we're planting cool flowers, and it's already August. So we've already I've got our seeds piled over there on a table because before we run out of different varieties, and it happens, as much as we try for it not to.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize when she says that date, that is when either transplants are going into the ground or you're direct seeding out in the garden, because we get that question all the time.
Yes,
I
we do.
know.
I mean, yes. And the way that, because I just did a bunch of seminars about or web workshops about this, what I explain it now that 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost is the runway for either a seed to sprout into a little baby plant and to grow into a little plant before it goes into winter and goes dormant. Or that same 6 to 8 weeks when you plant a transplant, it spends that runway getting established before it has to face dormancy. So true, Layne, that seeds and transplants are planted at the same time out in the garden.
That's crazy to me. I know I was listening to one of your episodes and I thought, yeah, that's right. And maybe this is why I'm always behind schedule because I'm always, I don't know, I don't do a lot of direct sewing. I guess that might be part of it too. And here I'm still trying to learn Nashville, and it's the weather here is a little crazy, but
and that's why we just are constantly creating resources. I mean, just constantly, with new challenges for people face and yeah. So, but Seed Talk has really become a big resource for us to be able to share with folks.
sure.
And we really try to give people the tools and equations so they can figure things out for themselves in their area, because there's not one recipe that's going to work for everyone across the board.
Yeah, and that is a huge thing. I know that when I have been listening and I have to always go back and fine tune the information for my area, because even though we may be very close in zonage, I think that maybe we have a few more cold days than other people do, and we have to allow for that. Or we have more extremes where we get down to that 10 degrees, 5 degrees, and then panic. And so, yeah.
I think that's why cool flowers really, or cool season hardy annuals, fell off the radar of most people, decades ago, I'd say in the 50s and 60s when, moms kind of went to work and the family garden was the first thing to go. I mean, she didn't have time to tend to a vegetable patch. And in fact, in my parents, they felt like it was a step up in society to be able to buy their vegetables at the grocery store instead of having to grow them. Do you know what I mean? And when all that evolved, this awkward group of plants that aren't like warm season tender annuals, they're easy to figure out. Your last frost date comes, once it gets warm, you plant them, you grow them all summer, and then the first frost takes them out. It's a little bit more involved to figure out your times with cool flowers, but I am telling you, it is the most carefree, easy group of flowers to grow once you find your sweet spots. And so we have just had to rekindle. We didn't make this up. We just rekindled
Right.
what was being done decades ago. And so people are doing it. I mean, we hear from people all over the world that are implementing, we now call it the cool flower concept. That's the figuring it out. When do you plant them, Scott? Well, you would say, all right, what's your winter hardiness zone? That only tells you what you can fall plant. Doesn't tell you when or anything else. That just tells you what'll survive your winter. And then you base it on the rest on your frost dates. And once you get it, that's a big push behind our latest project that's coming out this winter.
Yeah, so we keep saying when. And the thing I love about your latest project, it's going to help people figure out when and keep up with it. So I know when you shared this with me a few weeks ago, I was like super excited for everybody because you're creating this jumbo calendar. I'm probably not going to call it the right thing. Calendar journal that allows people to keep up with so much of this information, both in the planning side, but also for me, it's like to be able to look back and see what I did, find out what I did last year, fix it in this really easy format. So tell us more about it because I have to say I was pretty excited when you told me about it.
So I've written about this. It's the Jumbo Calendar Journal, and I've written about it in all my books. It's in my courses, Flower Farming School, all of my courses. I just tell people very honestly, this calendar is what runs my farm. And it is so great. And I learned about this down in Oklahoma at an ASCFG conference about 15 or 20 years ago. I can remember sitting in her building, and on the side of a big file cabinet was the biggest calendar I'd ever seen in my life. And I could just see all the information that was on there. And Vicky Standback, and it was her farm. And I said, tell me more about this. I mean, I'm the worst journaler in the world. I do not keep, I mean, Layne and I are like, couldn't be more complete opposites. I keep no information. I mean, it has to be so easy. And I mean, believe it or not, and I write books, right? But anyway, so I learned about this big jumbo calendar, and so I came home and bought one. It was called a jumbo calendar, and it's literally 20 inches wide and 30 inches long. And what that means is that the squares for each day in a month is so big that you can truly write usable information in there. And through the years, I have just tweaked it to literally run my farm because, I mean, anybody that's flower farming or even gardening, it's like
Right.
this time of the year, you have no brain cells left. You are so hot and exhausted. Do you think anybody remembered that they were supposed to have started their biennial Sweet William in the month of July and their cut flower kale? No. Why do I know it? Because it's written on the big calendar. I mean, none of us remember that stuff. So we were pretty excited when we kind of approached the big commercial printer that printed our catalogs, back in the days when we printed that big gardening catalog every year, about this project because it's a large calendar and it's spiral bound. It's kind of a specialty. And sure enough, they were able to do it, and we are going to be able to do it at a very at a price point that I said we cannot charge $100 for a calendar, right? So it's in the process, and this calendar is going to have what you need on the calendar of how to figure out when you plant what. And then also suggestions to use it like I do, like on Saturdays, the Saturday column, that's where I write the first harvest or things that happen on the farm that I really might want to know next year or 5 years from now that affected something
Right.
that we've done. And anyway, so it'll have all of my custom instructions on it. And this calendar hangs on the door of our farm building, which means that everybody involved can see it. I mean, so I'm not a spreadsheet person, but even put that aside, digital records are really only available to the person that owns the digital file.
True.
In a farming situation or in a home with other people helping with a garden, this way, everybody can see what seeds need to be started, how many seeds, how you're going to start them, what variety, how many, the whole 9 yards. And I mean, it's literally run my farm. And so we are going to make it available for people to customize their own calendar every year and then to use it as a journal for coming years, like I do. I have 12 years worth of calendars. And it just is, it's a joy to go back through them. It's fun, actually. It's a morning event. I love doing it.
That's so
I just
cool.
want to add too, Lisa, that the nice thing too is once you have figured out all your dates, you've calculated when would you start cool flowers in the fall and what you would start and when you might start in very early spring and your first warm season planting, you can then transcribe those over every year. You don't need to recalculate them unless you're obviously adjusting them like, oh, this was a little early, let me move it a week later or vice versa. So that's something that's nice about it too.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Layne. And also, it's like, and I wrote, that the final text has not been slashed by the editors yet, but it's like what I tried to stick to was using as few words as possible to put information on there so that it's easy to read at a glance. That's how you can use information. Do you know how many? I mean, I bought so many garden journals back when I first started flower farming, thinking I've got to keep track of all this stuff. Well, you write for a few days, then you never write again. And then it's like, how do you use that? So this journal has been a real big help to my farm, and we're super excited. And people can actually get on the wait list for it. It's on our website, it's in our app. You can go over there and get on the wait list because I'm pretty sure we'll have a little special something for people on the wait list when it's actually launched and you can actually purchase it. And we're just really, really excited about it.
Yeah, you should be. I know I was chuckling there to myself for a minute because I'm thinking, of all the journals, my wife's like, can we throw these out now? And I'm like, why? And how many people are like, oh, it's the beginning of the year. I get this brand new journal. I get this new book. I start, and the notes are so incredible at the very beginning. And then what, about March 1st, or maybe it's April 1st. We'll say April Fool's Day. Then we just sort of, it just sort of hits the fan. And then it's, I don't know. I didn't keep very good records after that point because it was just too crazy. And then, but yet I save them and I'm like, I never go back and look at them because it's too hard to find what you need. That's where I love the idea behind this because everything is that, you see, and Layne, to your point, you see everything you did last March. And that might actually be half of your decision-making process already done. Maybe some tweaking.
Yeah. And, something that's happening for me now, we were in high production for so many years on our flower farm. And then about 5 years ago, we took our foot off of that pedal and started more education and making all these resources. So what I realize now when I bring out those calendars, I mean, it is so fun, y'all, to set them up on a long table and put all the Januaries up and you walk down the line. How many flowers I used to grow way back when that when we went high production, we kind of kicked them to the curb because they were either too needy or they just didn't fit the high production model for whatever reason. And so it's just really, really, it's a great resource. You create your own resource, and it's a ton of blooming fun. And so we're really, really excited. My sister, who's designed the pages and all that good stuff, has really had a good time, and we are really, really excited about it. And we're going to try to get it out just as quickly as we can, but we want it to be exactly what we want. So and I didn't even say this. I didn't even say this part. I don't know what you officially call this, but it doesn't have dates written in, meaning that it's got all the days of the month and you write in the dates, meaning that you could buy two at a time if you wanted to save on shipping or whatever. One for this year, one for next year. You can start it at any time. We did that because so many people want to start at a different time of the year than January, So it's going to be the coolest thing ever. I'm as excited about this as I was about my books. It's going to be pretty cool.
Okay, so I have to say this, and I didn't, I'm glad to hear that about the dates. I'm really glad because I think to myself, kind of like again to what Layne was saying a minute ago, if you are planting something and you realize something's coming in earlier or later, why not go ahead and put that on the calendar for next year while it's fresh in your mind?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to
Yeah.
wait till the new calendar comes out. You can just go ahead and get two and or three or whatever and go ahead and just start planning that next year as you go along when you got everything fresh in your mind as you're harvesting or planting or whatever.
I am
That's a
totally,
really good idea.
yeah.
That is a great idea to review the just past month and then go ahead and transcribe that on next year's calendar. I love that.
And the number one rule is with this calendar, friends, is you write in pencil always. And it's not that because I mean, I give this in all the directions, but it's like, when we start all of our first succession, and it really walks you through the steps to find when is your first succession, you know what I mean? Um, but you write, that whole week is full of just multiple seeds. And so, not very often do they all actually get started on that week. And you're not erasing and moving them. But what we do is we suggest that, they're all there together. And then you actually pencil the date it actually got done. And when things get done, you just highlight it with a highlighter. A highlighter and a pencil. We should probably have those as accessories with this calendar.
Or included for
But
people who get on the waiting list.
or something. But
Yeah.
it's really, I see it as a tool. I mean, we're coaching these people all the time, our students, our followers, our customers, and we're just constantly trying to find an easier way to empower
Right.
them, not to give them a fish, but to teach them how to fish. And that's just another piece of it. So
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome. We're pretty excited.
Yeah.
And that's another thing you can also put on there is the number of seeds that you're starting of each variety.
Mhm.
And that's
Yep.
something that you can choose to repeat the next year or realize you want less or more. So that's another helpful tip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just nice to have it all in one spot and something at it. It's for me, I'm highly dyslexic, and that just means I see things very differently than you do. That's why spreadsheets literally look like Chinese writing to me. And so this was just a very simplistic, at a glance way to really see what I did and what I need to do and to look back over several years. And yeah, it's totally fun. So thank you for letting us talk about it because I'm totally stoked over the thing.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I just feel like, especially calendars, starting seed, all of these things, especially this time of year, is so important. I wanted to ask a question, uh, more specifically about starting seed. There's so many companies now producing amazing plugs that save time and energy, and of course, there's some crops that I don't have the patience for. So I'm really excited that those companies exist. But I feel like a lot of times people are really trying to make the effort to start perennials from seed. And like you mentioned earlier, some of, was it, I don't remember, was the dianthus you mentioned? I don't remember what you said. This is the time.
Biennial.
Yes, the biennial plants to go ahead and start because that way they get a growing season in to bloom next year. Well, you know what? I'm gonna even ask. Not, I'm not even sure if I want to say that because I have an experiment out in my front garden that's not working out like it should. so how do you guys tackle that, and how do you fit that into something like your calendar or in with your cool flowers?
So I'll talk about biennials, but I'll let Layne talk about perennials. So I don't grow but a couple biennials. A biennial is a plant that actually needs a cold period, and that's called vernalization before it'll bloom. So there's a couple of sweet Williams, and I talk about this in the cut flower handbook. It's like, I don't know whose idea this was in the horticulture world, but why one family can have so many different types of plants in it. I mean, this is true on Rebecca, Dianthus. There's biennials, there's hardy annuals, and there's perennials all in one family. And that's no
Crazy.
wonder we are so confused some of the times, right? And because of that confusion, that is one of the reasons I just don't grow as a flower farmer. So a biennial needs to be in the garden for a longer period of time. than a hardy annual does. And for me, as a small flower farmer, a small grower, meaning I don't have a whole lot of space, I am not looking to take up more real estate for a longer period of time, right?
Right.
So I've limited because there's many different, I mean, there's digitalis that are that way, Rudbeckias, I think I mentioned, and I'm sure that there are others. But the two biennial sweet Williams that we feel like is just such a significant cut flower crop that we do it, and that is Electron, which is an old heirloom, and Super Duplex. The color selections are absolutely fabulous. And Layne, mine looks great because we've already started it, So we had great
Yay.
germination and they're coming along beautifully in our grow room. And so they have to be started in the middle of summer for us. Thank goodness I start in a building, in a grow room, so it's cool in there. I air condition. If I was starting in a greenhouse, they're not going to start because they want it cool.
Right.
And also cut flower kale. It falls right into that same timeline. And so we grow them up and try to get them in the ground much earlier than our classic hardy annual cool flower crops. And we started from seed, and of course, we primarily use soil blocking and does great. Does great. So I'll let Layne speak to actual perennials.
So I was going to first say that there are some things that we call cool flowers that are technically perennials. So something like yarrow,
Mm.
and that does just get planted along the typical cool flower planting schedule. So you'd want to get transplants in the ground 6 to 8 weeks before your first expected fall frost. But the thing I would say is the biggest difference with a lot of perennials is that some of them require stratification, and you really have to take that timing into account or you can get completely thrown off. So one of the perennials I start some of every year is sea oats, and
Mm.
I will stratify that just based on my own experimentation. I do it for about 8 weeks of a cold, moist stratification in the refrigerator. So if I don't take that timing into account, I'll be completely thrown off. And then some perennials, also, as you get used to growing them, you'll realize they just don't grow as quickly and vigorously as an annual would when you start it that year. So you might want to aim for more of, like Lisa's talking about, the biennial planting time, because sometimes you'll want to grow it to a little bit of a bigger size. Whereas with the true cool season hardy annuals we're talking about, we will often grow most of them in 3/4 inch soil blocks, and they're 3 to 5 inches tall, and they get planted out just like that in the garden. Sometimes because the perennials are not quite as vigorous and fast growing as those, they might need a little more time before you want to put them outside. So I would just take that into account and the stratification timing if it's required.
So is that 6 to 8 week, I think is what you said earlier, period before your first frost? Because they're slower, do you have to back that up a little bit, or is that usually still enough time for them to kind of get acclimated before it gets cold?
So that is often enough time, but if you want to be extra safe, you could do, like Lisa was mentioning, the biennial timing, which might just be a little before that, like late summer, early fall. You could aim for that instead if you think they're going to take more time. But as you get more used to growing them, you might realize some of them really are fast. They can go out sooner, and then some might just be a little slower.
Sure,
That's
sure.
a great point, Layne. I never thought about it because, as Southerners, we're in the lower half of the United States. Delphiniums, which are definitely a perennial, if you live in New England or even in up in Pennsylvania and areas, they grow amazing perennial delphiniums year after year. We're here in the
Right.
South. It's our summers that just ravage them with stress, which leads to disease and pest, right? So we have always treated delphiniums, true delphiniums, as cool season hardy. And we've grown them like cool season hardy annuals, and they are slow to grow when they first start. So that's just a great point, Layne, that you really just back that up, or you do what some of us do. Those sometimes are the plants that we purchase plugs of. Because when there's a slow grower, wouldn't you agree, Layne? That works. Eucalyptus fall and Lysianthus fall under this.
Right.
Anything that takes longer to grow in a transplant stage, there are so many ways to kill them during that time. I mean, you
It's so true.
overwater them, you underwater them, you don't keep the temperature right. And, with annuals, they just grow so darn fast. It's like they grow in spite of us and our conditions that we put them through. Perennials, not quite so resilient to that, because overwatering is a big problem with slow growers, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I agree. And also, I feel like annuals can put up with less high quality of a soil,
Yep.
than perennials. They'll struggle a little more in the garden if it's not in ideal
Mm,
condition. So that's just something I've noticed too.
yeah.
And all of this has just reminded me why, I'm pretty much 99% a annual grower. I always have been. I do have peonies. They were family peonies. I get about 1,500 stems. So I mean, we have quite a few, but um, annuals just are the biggest bang for our buck in our small space flower farm.
Right.
And that's why we've become such avid seed starters, because the bottom line is this: when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I just can't start seeds," I said, until you have started at least 100 different times and failed, you haven't even scratched the surface. I've done it. I've killed more seeds than most people will ever start, because of how much we do, the volume that we start. And, so I don't want people to be discouraged. It's like I have killed my fair share of transplants and seeds. But yeah, perennials are definitely more challenging for that reason, I think.
Yeah. We brought up a great question, and I've had some a great point that I want to ask about because I had I had one of my local growers last year really struggle, and he has done a great job every year, and then last year was just a hard year for him. Like he was having bad germination, and he was having, and he's a soil blocker, so he follows the Lisa Mason Ziegler way of doing all of that, and the mix, everything. I mean, he's really a good grower. But then last year, it was just like struggled and struggled and struggled. And it was like, it wasn't just one thing like zinnias. It was like celosia. It was like basil. It was like a lot of things. And of course, I'm thinking when I first hear that, I'm like, maybe something was off in the soil mix or something. I don't know. And I'm just like, I'm sure there's other people that have committed mass, murder. And I'm just kind of, me too. I was talking about that earlier before we started. And so, any thoughts to that? I have two experts here. I'm just kind of curious what your first reaction is.
Well, when we get those emails in the office or somebody asks me on social, when I'm doing a live or something, whenever, if it's one seed, one variety, and all your other seeds did great, but this one has got a problem, maybe, I mean, it doesn't very often happen that it's bad seed. If you've bought it, if it's fresh seed and you've bought it from a reputable seed person, it's just not very common that that truly is bad seed. But when you have across the board, and I did actually experience this many years ago. I'm trying to think back. It's before this building that I'm sitting in even had air conditioning. That's how long ago it was. Where all of a sudden, here I've been this stellar celosia grower for all these years. I mean, I couldn't get my celosia to germinate. But it was like 10 different varieties. And when that happens, it is definitely environmental. I can't tell you exactly what it is because
Right.
you'd have to look at, but it's usually either air temperature, overwatering, you've done something because it's so very funny that sometimes I'm thinking of one particular person that I spoke to, and they insisted that's like I did everything exactly like the book tells me. And I said, all right, let's just walk through it I think we were at a show or something. I said, let's walk through it step by step because normally I don't get the opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
And then when she got to the blocking mix, she totally changed the ingredients. And it's like you feel like you did everything exactly step by step, but it's sometimes she had used some unfinished compost, which means it wasn't fully cooked, which just was a problem. Anyway, so it happens, but whenever it's across the board, I say it is definitely an environmental issue. What do you say, Layne?
Yeah, the same thing. And the question is what's causing it? And like Lisa said, that's pretty hard to determine. But it could be something as simple as, like Lisa said, were they mixing their soil and the compost they used wasn't fully ready? Or did something change in their water? I have spoken to one customer. I know that she was having mass failures on everything, and they tested their water, and there was something in there that was throwing everything off. And when they got that corrected, then they started having success again. But yeah, it's definitely something environmental, more widespread than specific to those seeds, unfortunately.
I mean, it can be as simple as if you're using seedling heat mats with built-in thermostats that are triggered off the air temperature, and your air temperature is warmer than normal, which means the heat mat's getting a heck of a lot hotter. You're cooking your stuff, you know what I mean? Or it's the complete opposite. It's cool, and this is what I find. It's too cool in the room,
Mm.
and the soil isn't getting heated up, and so there's just so many variables. It's like when you go to the doctor and start telling them your symptoms. It's like, oh gosh, I really did have a lot of symptoms. Wow, until you talk it out with somebody, you don't realize it, but it happens to all of us. I think all of us have had failures, and I have frequently said when I direct sow out in the garden, if I don't have one of our seed packets with me, which tells you whether to cover it with soil or not, I take a cool flower book. I don't rely on my memory. I wrote the darn book, and I still don't rely on my memory because that's key. Did you or did you not cover the seed? Because every seed, you can't assume which way
Right.
one is. It's based on science and facts.
Mm.
And that is a complaint in any season, any seed starting season. We always get the most questions about surface sown seeds and people struggling to germinate them. So if it's cool season, it's going to be snapdragons. I can
Yep.
tell you that
Yep.
right now. And if it's warm season, it's going to be
Yep,
celosia.
for sure.
Funny.
And that's, when we started using, I guess it's been over 5 years, the wide weave burlap. And so I learned soil blocking from Elliot Coleman. Anybody that hasn't read his books, he's a
Amazing.
master of just a great grower. And I learned it from him, right? And he said, he doesn't use plastic domes and plastic, not because it's horrible, but because it's so easy to introduce disease because it traps so much moisture. And if you're going to do it, you really have to monitor. Well, I can tell you right now, I go in my grow room one time a day. First thing in the morning, everybody gets taken care of. I don't think about that room or go back in there again. And so I never use it because he said it wasn't necessary to
Yeah.
use domes with soil blocking. So I never did it. But when we started growing so many surface sown seeds, snaps and celosia, as Layne mentioned, we just found my environment really did well to get those seeds to germinate, but other people's weren't quite like that. So we had to find a way for people to actually kind of help maintain moisture on the surface, yet allow air circulation. And the wide weave burlap really did it, helped a lot, helped us because I use it when I use a seedling heat mat. And because, yeah, it's a darn struggle. But once you get it, there's nothing like the miracle of a seed sprouting, y'all. I mean, it's just
I
awesome.
agree.
So a lot of times with surface sown seeds, a lot of times, especially home gardeners, they will put their seed trays after sowing directly on heat mats, and then they'll have them underneath grow lights. And if you have grow lights that don't give off a lot of heat, that may be perfectly fine. But if you have a grow light that gives off a lot of heat, not only are you probably raising the temperature perhaps beyond what that seed would want, but it's also drying out that surface and compounding the problem. So that's one of the main issues we
Hmm.
see with surface sown seeds.
Interesting.
I mean, we hear all the
I
problems
guess.
people are having, and that's what led her to where we are and, really led her also to have the brainchild of this Cool Flower course that just really addresses all of that stuff with
Yeah.
Cool Season Hardy Annuals.
Well, I have to say, I think it was 2 years ago I got burlap from you and I started using it, and I probably need to buy more, but I'm like, I mean, I just reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. I mean, it's like it's such a great product, and what a difference it makes. And domes, I have a love hate with them. And I mean, I have two out there right now with little baby Sarracenia plants in them, but they like the humidity, so it's okay. But I mean, it was just a great. I don't know. I feel like you have less fungus gnats. I feel like you have less issues with moisture. It's more even. It's not, I don't know. I just thought it was like something that simple. But I've got to ask this question. You brought up the heat mats. And so, This is the advantage of being a podcast host that have amazing guests on is all these questions that drive me crazy myself, I get to ask too, right? So I had so I had a heat mat for the longest time that had a thermostat, but it was a digital thermostat. So I had like a soil, a probe you put in the soil that monitored the soil temperature, and then it kept it within the range that I needed it. Now, when I bought my this was a smaller one, but when I bought my big mat that I use all the time now, from the Gardener's Workshop, and I bought it, I know that it has this built-in thermostat. So the question I'm dying to know is, how does it know? How does it know where it needs to be? Because I don't know. I have trust issues.
It's magic. It's magic, Scott. That there's a built-in thermostat in there that
Right.
has a sensor, and it is keyed off of the air temperature, and it warms up 15 to 20 degrees warmer than the air temperature that it's sitting in. And it works. It works really well. I mean, the seedling heat mats that we offer are just suitable heat mats. There are definitely professional heat mats, of which I used to have one back when we were in high production. It was an 8-foot long mat that had a separate probe and thermostat. I probably paid $700 or $800 for it. And there are definitely ones that have that level of control on it. But this is the seedling, that method of having that thermostat built into it is pretty much the standard in the industry. And they don't last forever. But, 3 to 5 years for a heat mat is a really good life.
But you're saying 15 to 20 degrees is about that range. Because I'm always like, when I'm starting seed, I'm like, okay, am I cool enough? I need the mat, or am I doing, and that's why I was kind of curious about that, not knowing where that window was.
Sure. So there's two different, when I'm starting warm season seeds, I can't start cool season seeds in the same room. Two
Right.
totally different air temperatures.
Right.
So for cool flowers like now, the air temperature I'm shooting for is 65 to 68 degrees, because that is what my heat mat is triggered off of. What cool season hardy annuals want is warm soil, cool air temperature. That's what their jam is. And to help do that, we also, a cookie cooling rack, like you put cookies on when you take them out of the oven, little short legs. We literally put cookie cooling racks over the heat mats for cool flowers just to cool it down just a smidgen. They still need warmth to know when to break dormancy and to actually sprout. But that gives them the consistent warmth, but it's not hot. But our warm season stuff, you just put it straight on the
Right.
heat mat, and I mean, they just pop so much quicker. It's more consistent, and they grow very vigorous roots also.
And if you don't have a lot of cookie cooling racks, I've even heard of people using mason jar rings,
Oh,
Oh,
great
that's a
for
idea.
the
good
lids,
one.
and they'll set them up there, and that's a pretty affordable way to be
Yeah.
able to put your trays up, and that's a good way to be able to adjust that temperature if you want just a little heat, but not the full
Right.
dose.
The bottom line is that Layne doesn't want to give up her cookie cooling rack. She's quite a baker
Right.
also, Scott.
Yes.
So she would never use her cookie cooling racks
Right.
for the heat mat. So yeah, I'm sure that you
Right.
experimented with that too. That's a great idea.
Yeah. I'd have to fight my wife for hers because she'd be like, no, there's nothing else going to the shelves. These are here. And two, if you, I know that we use sometimes because of shipping and things like that. When we get flowers in and things, there's these little wooden, like, square braces that come in boxes. They work great too for that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Oh,
And so it just
good.
depends. I mean, you just gotta look around. Sometimes you can find, you don't have to rob some of us have priorities, Lisa, and we're not giving up our cookies. Okay. So I'm just saying.
For sure. For sure. It's my mom, when I discovered to do that, gosh, my mom's been gone for a long time, so that was a really long time ago. She and my dad went out and scoured thrift shops and got me
Mm,
cookie cooling racks.
that's funny.
But yeah, but it worked really, really well.
That's great. Well, I have to ask this question. I know we talked about this ahead of time, and I know this is on your list, but we had so many people respond to a post that we reshared. And I wish I could remember the account, but she's located in Scotland, and she was sharing this bronze buplurum. And I have to admit that when I went to start mine, which was one of my mass murders, that it just, none of them did very well. I went back and listened to y'all's episode on Buplurum because actually I watched it because you had all the great notes on the YouTube channel. And so I was like, okay, I've got to have this bronze Buplurum in my life. And when I shared it on Instagram, apparently I wasn't the only one that felt the same way. And there was, I have to admit, I felt like I needed to create a support group for the people who had no success in growing this, because a lot of people said they had problem with germination and some things like that. So can you help us commiserate, or maybe give us some insights? I don't think you've grown it yet. I think it's what you said, but I know it's on the list.
So I just looked it up while we're talking. It is a different species. I mean, it's Buplurum, but it's longifolum.
Yeah.
It's called bronze bee. So we have not started it. So Layne's on it. We're going to get some seed. And it's not the same. I mean, a lot of people struggle to start just Buplurum. And that is typically, in our experience, I think more people have success than realize it, but the seedlings are so thin and they're kind of a bronzy kind of color, not the bronze Buplurum, but the regular Buplurum. When they're babies, they're kind of a dark color.
Really?
And people just don't see them. You just don't see them. I mean, literally, once you've spotted them, you'll never miss them again. But yeah, we're going to get some and check it out and do a little research. I've got a magic book upstairs about germination on seeds that some professor at a college, nobody would want to read this book. It's like a deep, but I'm going to look up now that I see what the botanical name is. I'll look it up and see. And who knows, maybe you will have some bronze Buplurum in your life, because it is pretty beautiful. I mean, so basically it's just the little, what do you call the little flower heads, Layne? Or they're not umbels, right?
I just would say florets, the florets within the
They're
flower
the
head.
bronze part. The plant is still green.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
So it's pretty cool. But anyway, we'll have to get back to you on that. Because I think I mean, Buplurum is hugely popular. I mean, I could have sold an acre of Buplurum when I was growing in production. It's just a great filler, and the shipped in stuff just doesn't even compare.
No, I agree.
For the normal Buplurum, some of our tips are, it is one that we typically recommend direct seeding outdoors if you're doing it in the fall. There is a method, like you referenced, Scott, in our Buplurum episode, that Lisa uses to start it indoors, which it sounds like didn't work for this in this particular instance for you. But we do also recommend oftentimes freezing the seed for a couple of weeks, doing it the proper way with desiccant packs prior to planting. And sometimes that will just help the seed to have more chance to pop and realize it's time to break dormancy when you bring it out. But you do need to make sure to do it the proper way with desiccant packs, or you could damage your seed.
Great point.
Yeah, but people struggle with Buplurum, and I used to, but once you do it successfully, you get it. And I agree, Layne. The freezing part just helps them know when to wake up.
Yeah.
And I would also say, I haven't obviously grown this one yet, but if I'm ever struggling with a seed that's like that and it seems a little trickier, I will often pop it in the refrigerator and try a moist stratification for a week or 2 weeks and just see if that can help, because a lot of times that can solve problems. I end up stratifying quite a few things that don't typically say to do it, and it just helps me get better germination. So I would experiment with that if you're having problems and if you have enough seed to waste on that.
But I don't think that's a waste, Layne. I think that teaches them so much, because it's like both
It
bells
does.
of Ireland. That little shell on that seed is so hard. And who waters their direct seeded beds every day? Few, if anybody. And without that water, that's that little embryo. Think about that little teeny embryo that's inside that seed, trying to push through an eggshell. It can't happen unless it's really moist and soft. And I think that was a great tip.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, so this, of course, has caused me to think of more questions. So I want to, for people, okay, so like I've done some moist stratification on a couple things, like my Saracena, I did that. Anyway, some other things. How do you do that, Layne? Because the reason why I'm asking is because it's interesting the different techniques I've heard, and like what works for you the best.
So I keep it really, really simple. So for starters, I have little Ziploc bags and I write on them the plant, the variety, and the number of weeks I'm going to be putting it in for. So then I will take paper towels and I'll just moisten them, but obviously you wring it out a lot. You don't want it to be too much moisture or you're going to probably get mold. And so then for me, because I'm soil blocking, I'll actually count out if I'm starting 100 seeds, 200 seeds, whatever it is, I'll count them out. I'll put them in the little paper towel, fold it up, and then I put it within a dry paper towel
Hmm.
and put that whole ensemble in the Ziploc bag. And then I will check on them every week to see if there's anything weird going on, if I see any mold starting. Sometimes I'll switch out the paper towels if I see that. And definitely, if you start to see any of the radicals emerging from the seeds, you want to get those planted right away because you could actually lose them if you leave them in for too long.
So the radicals are, you're talking about the actual sprout. Right.
Yeah, right. The little seed root,
Right.
right.
Okay. So, well, so okay. That's why I'm asking this question because people who might not know what a radical is. So you're talking about the root that actually starts, not the actual leaf that first starts.
Right. Typically, in my experience, that root is the first thing I will notice coming out. So, like, especially I'll see it if I'm experimenting. I started monk's hood from seed a few years ago. I've done it a couple of times and I wasn't sure. I couldn't find good, like, information on how long to leave it in. So I would just check and check and check. And then, sure enough, I'll start to see that little root coming out. And so that's when I arrived at, I think I did it for like 6 weeks or something. So that's what ended up working for me. But yeah, I always am on the lookout for those, which can be hard on small seeds to see, but you really do need to look because if that happens and you don't notice and you just plant them, you may have lost the seeds, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've killed that way too. Because that's why I was asking because I have, I mean, it's just a crime scene here every year. Okay. Let's just face it. But I had done that. I can't remember the seed now, but, I was waiting on this particular seed, whatever it was. I was waiting on that green sprout first. And I didn't realize, and I haven't done this a lot, but I didn't realize, no, that's way too long because I'm basically, they've already rooted into the paper towel by then. And so I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay, this doesn't work. So that's why I was asking. So, because then, fortunately for me, the seeds were bigger and I ended up salvaging some of them. But if they're really
Right.
tiny seeds, then are smallish seeds, it's really hard to get like how do you even get them off the paper towel? Because they really stick to that thing, I feel like.
They can stick, and sometimes you can even pull the paper towel off with it, like little bits of it if you really need to,
Sure.
but I typically don't. But that is just another reason why you want to try to get them before it reaches that point where they're growing through. I think it's better to be a little bit early than
Makes
to be a
sense.
little bit
Yeah,
late.
that makes
But
sense.
yeah, and some are just repeat offenders, and you'll notice as you do it more often. Like for me, I when I start Eryngium yuccifolium, they always that sprout starts coming out so much sooner than I think it is going to, and so that's why I check them. I'll just start checking them every week, just peeking in on them and making sure nothing's happening in
Sure.
there.
Sure.
I think, Scott, that the thing that I needed somebody to tell me is nobody gets it right the first time or the second time
Right.
or maybe even the fifth time. You just have to figure it out and, try to make notes if you do something different, so you know what you actually did right on the time that it goes right. And this is called, experience and gaining wisdom, and seeds are the most inexpensive part of our operation. And
Right.
I mean, I've loved bringing new people onto the farm through the years that just knew nothing about seed starting. And we just teach them how to start, like here's your job. You make soil blocks and you sow this seed and this is how you sow it. And I mean, the joy on those people's face when they come back to work in like 3 days and they have sprouted. I mean, and then it's like, of course, it's like having a grandchild out in the garden. They're like, oh no, we're not cutting these yet. We're going to let them grow more. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's pretty spectacular. So I think it's great that you have kept after it and you're learning so much, and that's how we all learn.
Well, and I feel like I'm always trying hard things too. That's always the issue because I'm like, I'm trying to find something that I can get my growers to grow and succeed with it. Maybe something that's not the average thing. So I create my own headaches. So don't be discouraged out there is what I'm trying to say. Don't listen to what I do. But
No, and I was just going to add that I reuse the Ziploc bags that I use for the stratification unless there's like a mold
sure.
problem, which I typically don't have, but I will write all my notes directly on that bag so that the next time I go to start that seed, I'll have a note, oh, the roots started showing 2 weeks in or three, like so that way I can adjust based on that. And it's just right there on the bag, kind of similar to the calendar Lisa was talking about, where it's just easy to see and it's accessible and right there when you need it. So that's another tip I would say for that.
Well, I have
The bottom
one.
line
Go
is
ahead.
we remember nothing. We remember nothing. I mean, I mean, we can't remember where we direct sow or which ones we sowed, or do you know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
the reality is,
Doesn't matter how many times you do it. You just, it's kind of like those medicine bottles. It doesn't matter how many times you pick that same bottle up. Those of us that are older, that might have more than one medicine bottle. You need to read the
yep,
label
yep.
so you don't
Yes.
take the
It's
wrong
true,
Yes.
thing.
Scott. I was filling a pill box just the other day, and it's like, I've been doing this for 20 years, and is that once or twice a day? It's like, we've been
Yeah.
doing this for 20 years. It's still twice a day.
So I have kind of a crazy question that has to do with seed starting, but I need some advice, and this is not advice for myself, but I know there's growers out there that go through this, and this is a different side of seed starting. This is my question. It has to do with these plants that are so freaking prolific that you plant. Like when you were talking about sea oats, I'm like, why do you ever have to start sea oats? I feel like they just, once you have them forever. But there are
You
things
do.
like
Yeah.
I have celosia coming up in one of my beds that I had there last year, and it's coming up everywhere. But a lot of times I think flower farmers, and if you're a gardener, maybe you have a different attitude about it. But if you're a flower farmer, you're trying to produce quality cut flowers, and you have a patch where you had triloba or celosia or I'm thinking, what is the jewels of opar, whatever, however you say it, and all of a sudden you have it everywhere. And some things that's okay, but some things it's not okay because you end up with thicker plantings. And I don't know, I think that the quality of the flower isn't exactly the same. So I'm kind of curious how you approach that, or maybe you solve that problem just through tillage and things like that.
Funny you should say that because last night on the live gardening show, which happens Wednesdays and Fridays,
Uh-huh.
Wednesday night, we were talking about cool flowers. And somebody asked about reseeding and do you rely on that? And
Yeah.
so, as a commercial cut flower grower, there's only been one instance that I have ever relied on a reseeded crop, and that was Triloba rudbeckia that you mentioned, because we had 100 foot by 15 foot, and we call it a habitat island, where it was originally planted in 2 rows, and it was such a prolific reseeder, and it was also the best bouquet filler we have ever used in the month of July and August. I mean, it was just the best. And so we always had plenty of that. And we just let it go do its thing. And we always had tons of great quality stems. The problem, like for let's just say celosia, I mean, first off, we probably grow 30 different celosia
Right.
varieties. And, we start from transplants because we want them the earlier. We want true colors. We want to know what we're getting. We sold the florist, you know what I mean? It's the reseeded celosia tends to be the same the same species that shows up. They look like spagatas or plumosas where they're just the spikes. Coxcombs can reseed, but they're not as strong. Um, and of course, if you're a flower farmer, you shouldn't be letting your plants go to seed. That's the
Right.
beginning of the. See, we never had reseeding. We cut our beds completely clean twice a week because we needed so many flowers. And so if you're not doing that, you're overplanting, and that resolves that problem. But
Good point.
triloba, we did it, but everything else we never relied on reseeding. The quality wasn't there. Weed prevention is non-existent, and you have to just do a lot of hoeing and cultivating.
Yeah, I agree. You just can't let it go to seed or you've kind of already lost the battle. So
Exactly.
if there are remaining flowers that you're not going to use for cuts, you kind of need to cut their heads off.
Yeah.
Wow,
Well, I
such a
mean,
violent
yeah. I mean,
episode.
if it's
I know.
well, but the bottom line is, Scott, is it a cutting garden or is it a landscape?
Exactly.
If it's a cutting garden, there should be no flowers left. There should never be flowers left in the garden that are beyond harvestable stage. I mean, if it's blemished or you don't need it, A, you overplanted, B, you better cut it so you have fresh stems next week. We suffer from this now on a regular basis because we plant to do these live gardening shows. And I still can't make myself not plant much, a lot, I mean, and so what happens? We're in it right now. We got tons of coxcomb out there. I would never sell it, but we use it, we show it on the show to show the tops of the heads,
Right.
because you have to keep it cut clean. It prevents so many other problems when you keep the garden harvested. If it's a cutting garden, totally different if it's a landscape.
Yeah, and if it's landscape, you might want to let some stuff reseed, which is
Exactly.
what I do here for a
Yep.
lot of things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think both those points are great. I mean, and I guess the one thing that I noticed, and it was about triloba specifically, is I have I had a plant come up, random plant, and I thought I honestly when I first saw it, I thought it was a type of coreopsis, so I kind of just let it do its thing. But then as it started developing and coming out this winter, I'm like, I don't think that's coreopsis. I think that's a Rebecca of some kind. And sure enough, it ended up being a triloba. And this one big healthy plant has these amazing stems, and I want to go cut them and bring them in my house, but I'm enjoying them in the garden. So not an issue.
Right.
But I've seen farmers who've let them go to seed where they're so jammed together that it's almost like they're all stretching and they're shaped a little weird. They're still a great filler, but it's almost like their side shoots have stretched so much because of the competition that they're really there's too open almost to use. So that's why I asked the question too.
And so interesting that you're pointing this out because I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like a spray, a nice tight spray is such a great filler.
Right.
But then when they get that open canopy, they aren't quite as useful. And I wouldn't be so convinced that it's not a different species because
Could be.
we used to have here, she's not here anymore, a native plant landscape designer. And she specialized and had a nursery that grew native. And so she did our native border here on our farm. And when she was here, I said, come over here. I have a triloba question. I said, I have triloba that I bought plants like 15 years ago. It's up in the front of the farm. They reseed. They're deep golden. They have a tight spray. They're amazing. And then I have this island back here of seed started triloba that I bought the seed and started. This was before we sold the seed even. And I said, all of them have a wider canopy. She said, Lisa, I suspect, and there's been discussion that there's so many different strands of triloba, but of course nobody's isolating any. I mean, there's no funding for that kind of work to be done. So it may be that, or it could be what you're speaking of. But ours were originally 2 rows, 100 foot long, 12 inches apart, and they still had the wide open canopy. But I have, and it's blooming right now, Scott. It's right out in the front of my farm, about a cluster of about 10 plants of that original amazing trilo. It's all good, but that's the best.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
what you described sounds like exactly what has happened. And I thought maybe it was more environmental because mine has plenty of space it doesn't have to reach or stretch or anything like that.
Right.
But it lasts so long. It's such a great filler
It's
and it's just great.
great. I mean, it's the most casual, just, and of course, native bees and finches adore it. I mean, when that native plant lady was here,
Mhm.
Denise, she said, I have never in all my years seen flocks of goldfinches. She said, I've seen 10 together,
Yeah,
15 maybe. When you walked back to our Triloba Island, I'm talking hundreds of goldfinches flew. I mean, yeah, so
that's
that's a really great
amazing.
one. In our island, finally, it's been 15 years. It's kind of been overtaken by other native pushy stuff. We're going to have to redo the whole thing. But anyway,
Mm.
it's a great
And I
plant.
just wanted to
Yeah.
add that triloba is one of my favorite things to just display in a vase all by itself. And I
Mhm.
have this little galvanized vase, and they look so beautiful. And like you said, Lisa, just casual, summery. They just look so pretty all by themselves.
Yeah,
Love them
I
too.
agree.
I love them.
Well, we always like to end our episodes with a piece of advice. I feel like Lisa's given advice on my podcast many times. So, Layne, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to say, what piece of
Uh-oh.
advice would you like to leave our listeners?
Well, I would say for people to just try to learn the reasons why they're doing something instead of just blindly following someone else's advice. And that's going to allow you to troubleshoot and adjust and adapt whatever you're doing to your specific growing conditions or your equipment. And my husband and I, we were just watching a Renaissance show. We love history type shows, by the way. And it was describing how all the Renaissance masters, they all start off by learning and copying the works of other great
Mm.
artists. And then they go on, they take what they've learned, and then they use that to develop their own unique style. So I would say to do the same thing with gardening or farming and just learn from people that you trust, but then don't be afraid to experiment for yourself and find a way that works better for you.
It's awesome, Layne.
That was
There you go.
awesome. That was it. That was so great. I see why you're the seed guru, and I'm so excited to have you both on the Flower Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yep, it's always our pleasure, Scott. We love that you support the Gardener's Workshop, and we just love your podcast and love being a part of it with you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation this week with Lisa and Layne. There's so much to take away and put into practice. Be sure to get on the waiting list for Lisa's brand new Jumbo Calendar Journal so you're ready when it's released. And while you're at it, visit the Gardener's Workshop online for everything from supplies and courses to information about the Flower Club, workshops, live events, and of course the Seed Talk podcast. You'll find us at theflowerpodcast.com for past episodes, resources, and more. Be sure to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel also, and follow us on Instagram so you never miss a new conversation or behind the scenes updates. Thank you so much for listening this week, and as always, I hope your week is full of beautiful flowers.